So, you're all very welcome to this week's edition of Let's Talk Dairy on the 6th of April. My name's James Dunne, and I have John Maher from the Grass10 team with me today, and also we'll hear from Ruth Fennell, Dairy Advisor in Dungarvan, a little later on. So I suppose, John, just to kick us off a little bit in terms of what's the state of play around the country. The weather's improved after a very difficult March. What's happening?
Yeah, sure. Look, James, it has been a very unusual spring. We got the results of the walks in this week from pasture base, and the average farm cover is over 800, which is well above about 100, 150, well above where we normally would be or should be. And I suppose that's a reflection of the spring, because March came exceptionally poor, and that meant that people didn't get grazed as much. February came exceptionally well, and I think that then that story reflects in the farm cover that we're over 800. Ideally, we should be about 600, 650. So for some, then there's a huge variation out there in the grass groups. You have those who have too much grass and won't get to finish the first round. You have others then, for other reasons, are living close to the edge, right? They have a farm cover less than 500 or 550, which would make people nervous. Saying that, then, James, the average growth rate for the week predicted is about for most places over 40. So really things have turned now. Weather has got milder, grass is growing. The pasture-based figures tell you that, right? And for many, we probably have more than we require. Now, I don't know what way April will come, but the most important thing is that you get control of where you are with grass supply. And for a lot that we go through in the grass groups, they have farm covers of 900, over 800, 1,000. It's going to be difficult to see how they would finish the first round, to be honest, on time now. So I suppose the first protocol is to see what recoveries in the first 3 to 4, not the first 1 or 2 grazed paddocks. If they're anywhere around 11 or 1,200, you've got to make a move to start the second rotation. We're now in at the end of the first week of April. This is where most people would plan to be, and it's time to make that move. A lot are actually have started the second round without finishing the first, which I think is actually a very clever idea, especially where you have a 13 or 1,400 in the first 2 paddocks, and then you drop off to 900,000. I think that's a good move. It gets control in place. So for most, because of the good February, they have a lot of recovery, and it's actually time to start the second round. The average farm cover, and averages only say what averages are, but at the same time, it suggests that there is plenty of grass and farm. That the 2 challenges that remain then, James, are the weather conditions. We're getting rain, while we are growthy, we are getting rain, and it makes conditions a bit challenging, and we have to be a bit smart about that. And I suppose the second thing then is to catch up on fertilizer. Like, a lot of March came wet, and people have to catch up on that. And I think they have to take that opportunity. The weather forecast since the weekend is a bit better than it was in the last day or two. So I think they're the 3 messages. Look at where you are with recovery on the second round. If they are 11, 1,200, you've got to look at starting the second round. The second thing then is to be aware of the ground conditions, play smart, right? And then catch up on fertilizer. I suppose the last thing, James, you and others and all the rest of the Teagasc projects and teams are involved in the clover events. Most of the ones in the south are going to finish today, and then we move more or less to the north next week. But it's a great opportunity now to start looking at reseeding and oversowing of clover. We don't need to remind everybody where the industry is going with fertilizer allowance, and having clover on your farm builds your own nitrogen factory.
And as you say, John, that it might feel we're coming out of a wet March, but it doesn't be long changing. We'll be heading into mid and late April very, very quickly. So where would people or viewers find information on those walks, John? As you say, there's still another week of them to happen next week.
So most of them are happening in the northern parts of the country. You have Grange, Robinson's, Westmead, Killianbrennan in Cavan, you've Ushingallen in Donegal, Robert O'Dee's in Limerick, he's in the south, or the O'Dea family in Limerick. So there's there's lots of events on. They're on the Teagasc website. They go out in the Grass10 newsletter, James, next Tuesday, right? So, and there's one in Athenry as well the following week on for those who have maybe an interest in the sheep. But look, let's be clear. Clover is clover, grassland is grassland, pasture is pasture. They all matter. Whether it's sheep, or cattle, or cows, doesn't make a difference. We just need to move into this arena and start this clover journey.
Very good, John. Well, look, thanks a million, and I suppose the best of luck with the clover events next week.
And thank you, James.
Thank you. So I suppose our next speaker for the remainder of the webinar is Ruth Fennell. Ruth is a dairy advisor, as I said, in Dungarvan in Waterford, and is going to speak on breeding beef from the dairy herd. So I suppose, Ruth, you have worked as both a dairy advisor, then a dry stock advisor, and now a dairy advisor. Again, so you've seen it from both sides as such. So I suppose maybe just to kick it off, why is this space? Why is there a lot of conversation around this? I know you at an event recently in Kildalton, and you spoke on this. Why is that whole breeding beef from the dairy herd? Why is it important to dairy farmers, given the fact that a lot of them don't rear their own calves?
I suppose if we look at the national figures, 57% of the national slaughter kill originated from dairy herd originally. And I suppose while I appreciate a large proportion of dairy farmers are not keeping beef calves themselves, that they're probably being sold off farm, it's hugely important that we've over 23,000 beef farmers that are involved in rearing stock at different levels, whether that's buying calves or buying weanlings or stores. And maybe some of them are buying them from calves and bringing them to finish, and others are buying them at a later stage and trading them on again. But in order for that to continue, it's really important that there's a margin for those farmers to make out of it. And I suppose there's a huge emphasis then previously, I suppose with the expansion in the dairy herd, when the quotas were gone, there was probably a big increase in the number of replacement heifers being bred. But I suppose with the stabilization in the numbers of the dairy cows, and also a lot of people, I suppose cows are lasting longer within the herds. Our replacements, requirements for replacements are not as strong as what they previously were. And I suppose we have a better opportunity now, to do selection and to improve the quality of the calf that we have, so that, I suppose the research is telling us that those that were previously buying calves, those numbers are dropping on an ongoing basis. It's not the easiest job in rearing calves, but I suppose it's really important, therefore, that as a dairy farmer, that we sell a calf that's healthy and well, and that there's a margin there for the person that buys it from us, so that he can get something out of it going forward as well too. And I suppose it's an important partnership that should be nurtured along the way, so that you build up relationships with your customers that come in, and that those customers are happy to come back and buy off you again in subsequent years.
Yeah, so really it's about producing a quality product and building that rapport and trust with their fellow farmers and fellow calf buyers.
Exactly.
So in terms of, is there a selection tool available, or what should our dairy farmer listeners, what should they be looking at now in terms of, there's always a lot of emphasis on picking dairy sires, but more emphasis now on picking quality beef sires. Is there a tool there available to dairy farmers?
There is, James, yeah. And I suppose where we probably starting is at the very beginning of selecting the cows that we're going to use to breed our replacements first. And I suppose we've seen huge strides in relation to the EBI and the genetics that can be improved by selecting suitable bulls. But for those that are pretty much at the top end of their game, it's getting harder and harder to make more rapid progress. And I suppose one of the areas that's come in now is, I suppose, with the reduction in our requirements for replacements, that we can start making a much harder selection on the cows that we're going to use to breed our dairy replacements. And therefore, the remaining herd are being used then to breed our beef stock going forward. I suppose with the introduction of sex semen as well too, it's had huge advances in relation to the use of beef AI on the dairy herd. So I suppose we're very fortunate in Ireland in relation to the genetic work that's being done. The main tool, I suppose, that people are going to use is probably the dairy beef index. There's been some significant changes in relation to the dairy beef index over the last year. And I suppose the tool of that was trying to combine the attributes that the dairy farmer is looking for, which is your short gestation, easy calving, and good survival rates, with also then the traits that the beef farmer was looking for as well too. So good growth rates, good feed conversion efficiencies, and there's been changes made in relation to that dairy beef index. So previously, up until last year, the calving traits were making up 49% of that total index when we looked at that dairy beef index. And what's happened in January this year is that 49% has been reduced to 31%. And for the first time in the world, there's a breeding objective selection tool that's also incorporating a carbon sub-index as well too. So that's why I suppose the dairy calving traits have been reduced slightly, is to make way as well for that carbon sub-index. And I suppose with all the talk about greenhouse gas emissions and our carbon efficiencies on farm, what they're taking into account in relation to that carbon sub-index is gestation length, age at slaughter, and carcass weight as well too. And that's coming in both on the beef side and also on the carbon side as well too. So yeah, I suppose we're starting with using that dairy beef index. I think one thing that's really important in relation to that as well too, I just pulled out some of the figures there earlier and was looking through them, is to look a little more detail as to where the values of those sub-indexes are coming from. So if we look at the dairy beef index and we pick up two bulls that are on that active bull list, they're bulls 24 and 25 on the list, they both have exactly the same value of €150 for their dairy beef index, but they're coming from very different strengths within the traits. So one of them is very strong on the beef side of it, and it's making up a good bit of ground in relation to that. And the other is making up it on the short gestation and the easy calving and the strengths that are going with that. So yes, very important that we look at the dairy beef index, but also look into the components of that so that you get the selection criteria of what you want as well too going forward.
So it's no different than really your EBI tool in the fact that you have one single figure, Ruth, but ultimately, as you say, you really need to delve into it and look within the sub-indexes.
Yeah, so if we're using, say, the sire advice report, if you go into your ICBF, you go into your sire advice and you'll see a button on the top left-hand side of the screen, and that allows you to select also beef bulls when you're doing your dairy herd. So we put a huge emphasis on scrolling through all those catalogues at the beginning of the year and trying to pick the dairy bulls for our cows. But we now also have the opportunity, and it's all laid out in front of us. So we select our dairy bulls as we would have previously done. And then we go in and we select in relation to the beef bulls on the dairy beef index. And like the dairy herd, we can narrow our selection criteria. So in a lot of farms, I would have clients that would have just, when the AI man comes, it's, look, what I want a short gestation, easy calving beef bull for this. And there's little emphasis then on the beef traits of it. But what we can do now is that we can still select on short gestation, easy calving, but also then put in a good beef trait. So in a lot of cases, when we're making up lists for people, we put it in a beef trait of above €100. And on the basis of that, then that allows us to pick those that, yes, they're short gestation and easy calving, but they also have the better beef traits that our beef customers are going to look for when they go forward to try and finish those animals as well too and make a profit on them.
So yeah, you've touched on that in terms of the selection. So you're looking at a beef sub-index of above €100. For the viewers on the call, in terms of, I suppose, what are the criteria exactly? How do you lay it out now? As you say, very often was bull of the day or one bull fits all right across a farming system. Maybe explain when you're dealing with your clients how now you're selecting beef sires. Because that concern is there, Ruth, in terms of that calving ease, gestation length, that's the real concern among dairy farmers, I suppose. Does that need to increase? Or can we get suitable sires with better beef traits while still maintaining that easy calving short gestation?
Look, I suppose, as I said earlier, there's a lot of people that will start maybe using the beef AI at the beginning of the breeding season because they'll have identified cows that they don't plan on breeding their replacements off. So in the past, I suppose, and when we were trying to look at expansion and increasing numbers, maybe for the first number of weeks, everything that came through that was ready to breed was given a Frisian straw. Whereas with the emphasis now on trying to improve the quality of those replacements, we're doing a lot more selection in relation to the cows. So when we go into our sire advice report, we can select the cows that we are using for Friesian breeding, and we can select those that are going to get our beef straws as well too. Generally, where I start is I will open the EBI report of the individual farm that we're doing up the sire advice for, and I look at where they are in relation to the beef sub-index. So if you go into your EBI report, you generate your most recent report, it will give you a figure for your individual herd, and you can see where you are. So if we look at nationally, on the dairy herds, the average beef sub-index value is -€3, okay? And what we're trying to do is when we select bulls, what we want to do is to put the progeny that result from that on the commercial breeding value, to give them a value that's either going to be, if we're talking about a dairy cross beef bred animal and we want it to be better than the average, then the progeny that are born as a result of that have to have a value in excess of €69. So if we've got if we're a national average herd and our beef sub-index is -3, then we want bulls that have a minimum value of above 71 in order to get above the average in relation to the progeny that will be born on that CBV value. If we're looking at a higher level then, and we're looking to try and get into the top 20% of those dairy beef bred animals, the figure for that is 124. So anything from 126 in relation to the beef value on those sires will get the progeny that are born as a result of that breeding into the top 20%. And therefore we probably put ourselves in a better position from a marketing point of view going forward in relation to that.
So yeah, absolutely. In terms of having a look at your own cows and then selecting accordingly within the beef sub-index.
Yeah, I suppose the advantage then too with the sire advice is that there's very strong reliability figures for those. So when we go into the beef sub-index, depending on when people are selecting to breed, we may not necessarily be looking for short gestation if we're happy maybe to start breeding with our beef AI maybe a week before what we would start with our dairy AI, and it mightn't necessarily have to be a minus for gestation if we're prepared to do that, and we may be able to get stronger beef traits. But we can also put into that selection criteria the score that we're prepared to accept in relation to calving difficulty. So in a lot of cases I will put in, say, a maximum of 4% calving difficulty on the cows, and I want a minimum of 85% reliability on those figures. And I will still get a good list that are meeting that criteria above the €100 on the beef index as well too. So look, the figures are there, and it's just a matter of I suppose maybe planning a little bit in advance and ordering a few of those straws rather than leaving it to the end and seeing what's available on the day.
A question in there from our viewers in terms of should they pick a team of bulls, I suppose, to suit different cows and even different parity structures within the herd, and maybe just comment on that, Ruth.
Yeah, I suppose look at when we're talking about our heifers or our first lactation animals, and look for all on the dairy herd, I suppose the ease of calving is a very important figure, but obviously as a mature cow will be able to, you know, maybe manage a slightly increase in calving difficulty figure than what we might be prepared to accept on a first lactation or a heifer as well too. So yes, depending on where we're starting on and what animals we're going. So what we did when we prepared for the event in Kildalton was we compiled a list of two different lists of bulls, one of those that were above 0 for gestation length. And as I said, we put in the selection criteria of no more than 4% calving difficulty, a minimum of 85% reliability, and a beef value greater than 100. And we also then compiled a list for those that were minus for gestation. And I suppose on the first table where we were above the 0, we would consider maybe using those bulls that would probably more than likely have stronger beef traits. They would be the more beef type animals. And we might use those on our mature cows and start using those a week or so before we would start our Friesian AI. So even if they do carry 3 or 4 or even 5 days in the gestation compared to the other bulls, they will still calve around the same time as a result of that because we started breeding. So yes, we'll use different bulls depending on where in the breeding season we're dealing with. And also, I suppose, like certainly down here, we will have a proportion of herds where there's a Jersey influence. And in order to compensate for that, we will be probably looking for higher beef merit figures for the bulls that we're selecting to try and compensate for that as well too. And we can still, with a Jersey influence, still get animals that would have a good CBV value going forward, where we've taken the care to select stronger beef merit bulls.
Absolutely, and that's a very important point in terms of meeting carcass specification. With the right bull used, Ruth, there's no issues in terms of meeting carcass specs with those genetics. Another question in there, in terms of targets, I suppose you mentioned calving on between heifers and cows. There's the opportunity there to select on calving for both heifers and cows. Is that correct?
There is, yes. And look, at obviously with a heifer, we're only going to select those that are deemed as calving difficulty, where the figure is low, and we want to give those every chance. We're not, just because we're selecting beef bulls, we're not shying away from the fact that the most important traits on the dairy side is the easy calving and the gestation length and the survivability of those calves as well too. But we're just bringing the beef emphasis into it as well too. So we're still selecting highly and with good reliability figures on those for our beef sires, but we're also keeping in mind the beef traits as well too. And we would have said before, it's very hard to marry the two. It's not a complete walk in the park, but we can do it, and we just need to be aware of that and select accordingly then.
Yeah, and I think so. I think, look, at speaking to groups, no different than yourself over the last number of weeks, a lot of farmers have placed greater emphasis over the previous breeding season and haven't run into any increased calving difficulties, as you say, by minding both sides of the traits, in terms of still minding the calving traits, but ultimately increasing the beef merit of their calves, which shows the tool is working, Ruth.
And I suppose a lot of them now, where we've been fortunate, is that the CBV value is available for the dairy farmers to view for his own stock that he's bred. So if you go into your view profiles on your ICBF account and scroll down to the view profile section and go into the CBV value, what it does is it lists the CBV value, which is the commercial breeding value, for all of the stock that are on your farm that are eligible for a rating. So there are dairy cross dairy males, or dairy cross beef males and females, and then if there's any suckler bred on the farm as well too. And it gives us that value for each individual animal that's on the farm, not only as a euro value, but also on a star rating basis. And it's a great tool then for, if I was a farmer and I was looking to possibly sell stock, I can use that and say, look, the stock that I've bred here are significantly better than the average of what you're going to find, and these animals should return €150 more to you than another calf that has a lower value than what these have. So it's a great tool to be able to market stock going forward as well too.
Explain to the people, and absolutely, in terms of it's another selection tool, and sometimes we need to simplify these things. They can get complicated. So explain to us a little bit, what is CBV, and I suppose what role do you see it playing over the coming years, Ruth?
Okay, so I suppose it's trying to put a value on comparing one calf with another calf. So if we go to a pen and we look at I don't know, let's just say 2 Angus calves that are off a dairy cow, okay? And we could have massive variations in relation to the CBV value. So we could have one that has a CBV value of 20, and we could another one that has it at 150. And what it means is that at the end of the day, that calf should, when we compare 20 versus the 150, should leave €130 more in my pocket at the end of the day when I bring that calf to finishing. And that's through a combination of a number of different things. So where we spoke about the dairy beef index being a combination of the beef traits and the calving traits on the dairy side, the commercial breeding value is really taking into account, it's excluding all the calving traits. So if I'm a beef farmer and I'm looking to buy a calf, I really don't, it has no impact on me going forward, whether it was easy calved or whether it was a short gestation, or, you know, so really it's the beef traits that are coming in. So what they're looking at is in relation to carcass quality, carcass conformation, carcass weight, its growth rates, its feed intake characteristics, you know, so all of those come into play in relation to the CBV value. I suppose one of the main emphasis that was on previously was looking at those that were heavy carcass weights and good carcass conformation. But what was realized then was those animals, more than likely, because of the fact that they've gained extra weight, have spent extra days on the farm, and there's a cost on keeping those animals on the farm. So they put an extra cost of €35 per day, and that's a charge for those animals if they've taken longer to finish. So the age of slaughter is also coming into that. So obviously we want an animal that will grow fast, will get finished at a younger age, and it will meet the requirements in relation to carcass conformation and specifications.
Very good.
Plus the CBV value is just putting an economic value on all of those and how much more it can leave in my pocket at the end of the day.
So I'm right in saying every calf is going to have that commercial beef value rank, and it's available there.
So they have to obviously have their sire recorded in order to have that figure available to them. I suppose the majority of those that are using AI will be recording the sires. If you're using a stock bull, you have to record the sire in order for the CBV value to appear on it. It's available for, I suppose, an individual farmer on his own stock. We had hoped it will be displayed in all the marts going forward this year. It is being displayed in marts where the parentage has been verified. So where those animals have been genomically tested. Currently, it's not available for those that haven't had parentage verified. But look, that's something that's going to be worked on going forward. But for those that are selling privately, it's available there, and there is a CBV value as long as they're meeting those criteria. So, like I said, the dairy male or the dairy beef male or females going forward.
Just one further question in there, and maybe what would you say to this dairy farmer in terms of that their calf buyers or the beef farmers aren't actually asking, you know, are they AI bred calves? What's the sire? What is the CBV value? What would you say to those dairy farmers, I suppose, in terms of the question really is they aren't being asked for it.
I suppose they mightn't be being asked for it. I suppose it's a new figure that's come out, and it's probably not been spoken about prior to it was spoken about, I suppose, at the back end of last year, but it's something that's new. But I suppose it's in the dairy farmer's interest in order to show, look, I have these calves for sale, and if we take that the average of a dairy beef cross is coming in at €69 and mine are at 150, so they're well above the average. So therefore it's in your interest to look at superior quality calves and what you can get. They may not be asked for it, but it doesn't mean that they don't have to give that information. And it's very easy explain when there's a euro value put on it, that at the end of the day, my calf should leave you €100 more than what the average is going to do.
And when we look, Ruth, ultimately at the margins on cattle rearing enterprise, €100 per animal makes up a significant amount of the margin obviously associated with these animals. So that really lies in the dairy farmers' hands, is what you're saying, with the quality of bulls that they choose to use. Yeah.
And look, we're not saying that we're foregoing any of the criteria that we have. We still want the easy calving, and we still want the appropriate gestation length as well too. But we want to do that and bring the beef merit traits into it as well.
I might just give you the final word then for listeners in terms of they're going picking their bulls now. Give me a 1 minute kind of the 2 or 3 key points they need to look out for this breeding season.
I suppose start with selecting the cows that you're going to use for your replacements, and everything else then obviously will come in for your beef breeding side of it. Take the time that you put into selecting your dairy sires, put that same time into selecting your beef sires. Run your sire advice report, which will allocate 3 different bulls, the most appropriate ones, then when you've selected your team, to those cows going forward, and make sure to order those in advance so that you have what you want available to you when you start your breeding season.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Excellent insights there into a topic, I suppose, that's has been talked about a lot over the coming weeks. So in terms of increasing the quality of the dairy farmer's calf crop, as you said, really it's about building trust, it's about building rapport and that repeat custom, and we'll do that by improving the quality of our AI sires. So for the viewers, George will be back next week, and George will have dairy farmer Eugene Lawler on to talk about matching stocking rate to grass grown at farm level. Very interesting in terms of what Eugene has actually done over the last couple of years on his own farm. So look, thanks a million, and farm safely. Thank you. Bye bye.